Picture yourself stepping into the shadow of a crumbling stone archway, the air thick with the dust of centuries, and the quiet hum of stories waiting to be heard. All around you, the echoes of lives lived thousands of years ago seem to linger, whispers of triumphs, mysteries, and civilizations that vanished, leaving behind only fragments of their world. It's in these moments, standing amid the ruins, that we feel a profound connection to the past and an irresistible pull toward the unanswered questions that history has left behind. Today, we're setting out on a journey to explore 21 ruins that hold the keys to some of the biggest mysteries historians are still grappling with. These are not just piles of old stones or forgotten monuments. They are active puzzles, each one daring us to look closer, think deeper, and reconsider what we thought we knew about human history. From the high Andes to the deserts of the Middle East, these sites challenge the very narratives we've built around ancient peoples, their beliefs, their technologies, and their dreams. What drove them to achieve the impossible? What caused their societies to rise, flourish, and sometimes disappear almost without a trace? As we move through each of these extraordinary places, we'll uncover how they force us to rethink everything from the origins of religion and society to the limits of human engineering and imagination. This isn't just about the past, it's about understanding our own place in a long, unbroken chain of curiosity and innovation. So settle in, open your mind, and get ready to explore the secrets hidden within these ancient ruins, secrets that continue to shape not only history, but the very way we see ourselves today. There's something undeniably magnetic about a mystery left unsolved by time. For as long as humans have looked back, we've been drawn to the physical remnants of those who came before us, those silent, stoic ruins that dot our landscapes. They act as portals, offering us a tangible, if fragmented, connection to entire worlds that have faded from memory. This allure isn't a modern invention. Think of the Renaissance, when artists and scholars looked to the crumbling grandeur of Rome for inspiration, or the 19th century, when figures like Heinrich Schliemann, armed with little more than a copy of Homer's Iliad, set out to find the lost city of Troy. These early endeavors were often as much about adventure and romance as they were about science, driven by a powerful desire to prove that legends could be real. That quest has evolved dramatically with the tools at our disposal. Today, we're no longer limited to shovels and speculation. Archaeologists employ ground-penetrating radar to see beneath the earth without lifting a single stone. They use LiDAR technology to strip away dense jungle canopies from above, revealing entire cities hidden for centuries. Chemical analysis of soil and artifacts can tell us what people ate, what they traded, and even when they lived with astonishing precision. We have more data, more technology, and more knowledge than ever before, and yet the fundamental questions at the heart of the most famous ancient sites remain. How were these structures built? Why were they built? What did they mean to the people who created them? The persistent mystery of a place like Stonehenge isn't a sign of failure. It's a testament to the incredible complexity and ingenuity of ancient cultures. These gaps in our understanding are not empty spaces but active arenas of inquiry. They fuel a beautiful collaboration between scientific discipline and public imagination. Academics publish papers proposing new theories about celestial alignments or social organization, while enthusiasts and visitors from all over the world bring their own wonder, their own personal connections, and their own questions. This collective fascination is what keeps these sites alive, transforming them from static monuments into dynamic puzzles that belong to all of humanity. Ultimately, unraveling these mysteries is about far more than just filling in blanks in a history book. It's a profound journey into the human spirit itself. It's about understanding our innate drive to create, to believe in something larger than ourselves, and to leave a mark that echoes through the ages. Every time we re-examine a carving or challenge a long-held assumption, we are participating in that same timeless pursuit of truth. We are acknowledging that the past is not a closed door but an ongoing conversation, and these ancient ruins are the most compelling voices in that dialogue. Now let's travel to a windswept hill in southeastern Turkey, a place that has single-handedly upended one of the most fundamental stories we tell ourselves about human progress. This is Göbekli Tepe, a site so ancient it's almost incomprehensible. Its oldest layers were constructed around 9,000 years before the Common Era, a staggering 11,000 years ago. To put that in perspective, this complex of stone rings and towering, elaborately carved pillars was already ancient by the time the first stone was laid at Stonehenge. For generations, we were taught a straightforward narrative that humanity's journey began when we learned to farm. Agriculture, the theory went, produced a food surplus. That surplus allowed people to settle down in one place, which in turn led to complex social structures, specialized jobs, and finally, the spare time and resources to build monumental architecture and develop religion. Göbekli Tepe shatters that sequence entirely. What we find here is the complete opposite. This is not the work of a settled agricultural society. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. They lived in a world of nomadic bands, following herds of animals and foraging for wild plants. Yet, they somehow organized themselves to quarry, transport, and erect massive limestone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, and arrange them into great circular enclosures. The T-shaped pillars are not blank monoliths. They are masterpieces of prehistoric art, covered in finely carved reliefs of animals, foxes, cranes, scorpions, and lions. This wasn't a village or a permanent settlement. Archaeologists have found very little evidence of daily domestic life here, like hearths or houses. What they have found points overwhelmingly to this being a special place, a ritual center, what its lead excavator, the late Klaus Schmidt, called the world's first temple. Schmidt's revolutionary theory turns the old narrative on its head. He proposed that it wasn't agriculture that led to religion and complex society, but perhaps the reverse. The need to build and maintain this sacred place, to gather for shared rituals and feasts, may have been the catalyst that forced hunter-gatherers to organize on a scale never before seen. This coordination could have spurred the early experiments in cultivating wild grains and domesticating animals simply to feed the large groups of people who gathered here. In this light, Göbekli Tepe isn't just a temple. It might be the very birthplace of the settled, agricultural civilization that would eventually dominate the planet. But this revelation only deepens the mystery. What were the rituals that took place here? The carvings offer tantalizing yet silent clues. Were they coming together to appease the spirits of the hunt, depicted in the stunning animal imagery? Was it a funerary complex, a place to honor ancestors? The most baffling act of all is its end. Around 8,000 years before the Common Era, after more than a millennium of use, the people of Göbekli Tepe deliberately and carefully buried their entire sacred complex under tons of earth and rubble, preserving it perfectly for us to find millennia later. Why? Was it an act of reverence, sealing away a holy site that was no longer in use? Or was it an attempt to hide something, to contain a power or a memory they no longer wished to be connected to? We may never know the specific reasons, but this deliberate interment is what saved Göbekli Tepe, gifting us a perfectly preserved time capsule that continues to challenge everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. and the primal human impulse to come together and create something greater than ourselves. Now, let's shift our gaze from the ancient hills of Turkey to the vast, sun-baked plains of southern Peru, where an entirely different kind of mystery unfolds, one not carved into stone, but etched directly into the surface of the earth itself. This is the home of the Nazca Lines, a breathtaking collection of hundreds of gigantic geoglyphs spread across nearly 200 square miles of desert. Created by the Nazca culture between roughly 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these are not small markings. We're talking about lines and shapes of an almost unimaginable scale. A hummingbird with wings outstretched, so large you could lay a jumbo jet across it. A spider, a monkey, a whale, all drawn with a single, continuous line that never crosses itself. Then there are the geometric shapes, immense trapezoids, perfect triangles, and lines that run arrow-straight for miles across the desert floor, converging and diverging in ways that seem to defy simple explanation. The most immediate and perplexing question is how they were made with such stunning precision. The Nazca people had no access to flight, no drones, no hot air balloons. Their method was deceptively simple, a testament to incredible planning and skill. They carefully removed the top layer of dark, sun-baked pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath. The arid climate, with its minimal rain and wind, has preserved these shallow grooves for over 2,000 years, but the how, as impressive as it is completely overshadowed by the why. Why would a people invest such enormous effort into creating artworks so vast that they can only be truly appreciated from high in the sky? This central mystery has spawned a fascinating spectrum of theories. One of the most enduring, championed by the dedicated German mathematician and archaeologist Maria Reich, who spent decades living alone in the desert to study and protect the lines, posits an astronomical purpose. Reich believed the lines functioned as a giant celestial calendar, with certain shapes and lines pointing to key positions of the sun, moon, and stars to mark solstices and seasonal changes crucial for agriculture. Her work brought the lines to world attention, though later scholars have found the astronomical alignments to be less precise and consistent than she proposed. Other theories suggest the lines were sacred pathways, walked during ritual processions to pray for water in an incredibly dry environment. Some of the long, straight lines do lead to small shrines or sources of water. The animal figures may have represented deities or spirits connected to water and fertility. The spider, for instance, is a symbol of rain in some Andean cultures. Then, of course, there are the more speculative ideas, including the famous but widely debunked notion that these were landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors. While this captures the public imagination, archaeologists point out that the lines are far too fragile to support the weight of any craft, and that the concept says more about our modern fascination with aliens than it does about the Nazca people themselves. Perhaps the most compelling modern interpretation views the lines not as a message for gods or aliens, but as a way for the Nazca people to see their own gods. By walking the pathways or viewing the figures from the surrounding foothills, they could have engaged in a spiritual practice where the giant geoglyphs were meant to be seen by deities residing in the sky above, a form of prayer made permanent in the earth, a desperate and beautiful plea for life-giving water from the heavens. The sheer scale of the project speaks to a unified, communal effort driven by a powerful shared belief. The lines are a monumental expression of faith, a permanent inscription of a culture's hopes and their sophisticated understanding of geometry and organization, forever asking us to look up and wonder what they saw when they gazed at the endless desert sky. From the sprawling desert glyphs of Nazca, we journey now to the damp, green grass of England's Salisbury Plain, where a different kind of ancient marvel commands the landscape. Stonehenge is arguably the world's most famous prehistoric monument, an icon of mystery that has captivated the human imagination for centuries. Its familiar ring of towering sarsen stones capped with lintels is instantly recognizable, but the true story of this place is far more complex and layered than its silhouette suggests. Construction here wasn't a single event but a project that unfolded over more than 1,000 years, beginning around 3,000 years before the Common Era. It started as a simple circular ditch and bank with wooden posts. Centuries later, the first bluestones were brought from distant Wales. The final and most dramatic phase, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, saw the arrival of the gigantic sarsen stones, some weighing up to 30 tons, which were shaped, raised, and carefully locked together with sophisticated jointing techniques that would be impressive even today. The most obvious and compelling clue to its purpose is written in the sky. The entire monument is precisely aligned so that on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the rising sun directly pierces the heart of the circle, its rays shining through the entrance and illuminating the central altar stone. Conversely, at the winter solstice, the sunset aligns perfectly between two of the grandest sarsen trilithons. This undeniable celestial connection has led many to see Stonehenge as a gigantic astronomical observatory, a Stone Age calendar that tracked the seasons with impeccable accuracy, guiding agricultural cycles and religious ceremonies tied to the sun's life-giving power. Yet the sheer ambition and effort involved suggest its purpose was far greater than mere timekeeping. How did Neolithic people, without the wheel or draft animals, achieve this feat of engineering? The smaller bluestones, each weighing up to 4 tons, were transported from the Preseli Hills in Wales, a journey of over 150 miles. Theories on how they made this epic trek range from the practical, like rolling them on logs or transporting them on rafts along the coast, to the more symbolic, suggesting they were carried over generations as sacred relics from an older homeland. The larger sarsens were likely dragged from quarries 20 miles away, a Herculean effort requiring the coordinated labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. This level of social organization is itself a mystery, pointing to a highly structured society with powerful leadership and a shared, compelling motivation. This has given rise to other compelling theories about Stonehenge's ultimate role. Was it a center of healing, a prehistoric Lourdes? The presence of the bluestones is key here, as some archaeologists note that the springs near their Welsh origin were long believed to have magical, curative properties. Perhaps these stones were thought to concentrate that healing energy, drawing pilgrims from across Britain seeking cures, a theory supported by the number of human remains found in the area showing signs of severe injury or illness. Another powerful idea is that Stonehenge served as a great unifying project, a monument that brought together disparate, possibly rival, tribes from across the British Isles. Working together on such a colossal endeavor would have forged alliances, created a shared identity, and established a neutral, sacred ground for gathering, trading, and performing rituals that reinforced their common beliefs. Recent archaeological work has dramatically enriched this story, shifting the focus from the stones themselves to the people who built them. Sophisticated surveys and excavations of the surrounding landscape have revealed that Stonehenge was not an isolated temple, but the core of a vast ritual complex. The discovery of numerous burial mounds or barrows containing cremated remains indicates it was also a domain of the dead, a final resting place for a privileged elite, perhaps a dynasty of ruling priests or chieftains. Even more astonishing was the find of Durrington Walls, a massive settlement just 2 miles away, which appears to have been a bustling village housing the thousands of workers who built Stonehenge. Analysis of animal bones littering the site suggests they celebrated with enormous midwinter feasts, likely coinciding with the solstice ceremonies. This paints a vibrant picture of Stonehenge not as a silent, lonely circle, but as the pulsating heart of a thriving ceremonial landscape, a place where the living gathered to honor the sun, bury their dead, and affirm their place in the cosmos. Its true meaning likely wove all these threads together: astronomy, ancestor worship, healing, and unity, creating a symbol so powerful its silent question continues to resonate through the millennia. But the sheer, mind-boggling precision of the Great Pyramid is where the true mystery begins. Its base is almost a perfect square, with sides that vary by less than 0.2% in length. The four sides are aligned to the four cardinal directions with an error of just a fraction of a single degree, a feat of accuracy that would be impressive even with modern GPS technology. How did the ancient Egyptians achieve this near-perfect alignment to true north? The leading theory suggests they used a method called the Indian Circle, tracking the shadow of a rod over the course of a day to find due north. But the flawless execution of this across such a massive scale speaks to an almost supernatural level of planning and skill. This mathematical precision extends to the pyramid's very dimensions, with the ratio of its perimeter to its original height equaling 2 times pi, and its proportions seemingly encoding the planet's dimensions. Were these mathematical constants deliberately embedded by the architects, or are we, centuries later, seeing patterns they never intended? This question lies at the heart of the pyramid's enduring enigma, fueling endless debates about its true purpose. The traditional and most widely accepted view is that the Great Pyramid is exactly what it appears to be: an elaborate and grandiose tomb for the 4th dynasty pharaoh Khufu. This theory is supported by the discovery of a sarcophagus within the king's chamber, a structure built with immense granite blocks that would have taken enormous effort to place. The logic is powerful. What else could justify such a monumental expenditure of labor and resources but the ego and divine aspirations of a god-king? The ancient Egyptians believed in an elaborate afterlife, and the pyramid, with its narrow ascending passages and grand galleries, could be seen as a machine for resurrection, designed to launch the pharaoh's soul directly to the stars, specifically to the constellation Orion, which was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The surrounding complex, with smaller pyramids for queens and mastabas for nobles, fits neatly into this funerary narrative, painting a picture of a vast city of the dead centered around the divine ruler. Yet for many, the tomb theory feels incomplete, even insufficient. The sarcophagus in the king's chamber was found completely empty, with no mummy, no grave goods, not a single inscription or hieroglyph to identify Khufu. The entire structure is devoid of the artwork and texts that adorn other, later Egyptian tombs. This profound silence has given rise to alternative theories that push the boundaries of imagination. Some researchers point to the pyramid's unique construction materials, like the granite in the king's chamber, which contains quartz, a mineral known for its piezoelectric properties, and suggest the structure was designed to be a massive energy generator or a conduit for harnessing the Earth's natural power. Others look to its celestial alignments, noting how the descending passages point toward specific stars, and propose it was an astronomical observatory or even a gateway for cosmic knowledge, a physical repository of advanced wisdom from a lost civilization. The debate has been supercharged in recent years by modern technology. Scans using muon radiography, a technique that can see through solid stone, have revealed the existence of several previously unknown voids or chambers within the pyramid's dense core. What lies inside these hidden spaces? Are they structural relief chambers intended to redistribute the immense weight of the stone above? Or could they hold the answers we've been searching for all along? Perhaps the actual burial chamber of Khufu, untouched for millennia, or something even more extraordinary. Each new scan, each new theory pulls us deeper into the puzzle. The Great Pyramid's allure isn't just about its age or size, it's about what it represents, the breathtaking capabilities of ancient people, and the tantalizing possibility that they possessed insights and knowledge that we are only beginning to grasp. It stands as a permanent challenge, a silent stone giant daring us to unravel its secrets and, in doing so, perhaps redefine the limits of historical possibility. Leaving behind the geometric perfection of Giza, we ascend into the mist-shrouded peaks of the Andes, to a place that feels almost suspended between the earth and the heavens. Machu Picchu is a name that conjures images of breathtaking beauty and profound mystery, a city of stone seemingly woven into the very spine of the mountain range. Built around the middle of the 15th century at the height of the Inca Empire, this architectural marvel was inhabited for less than 100 years before it was mysteriously abandoned, likely just before the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the region. Its existence was effectively erased from history, hidden by dense cloud forest until 1911, when the American historian Hiram Bingham was led to the site by local Quechua guides. What he found was not a lost city in the traditional sense. The local people had always known of its presence, but a discovery that would capture the world's imagination and become an enduring symbol of Inca ingenuity. The immediate and most compelling question about Machu Picchu is a simple one. What was it for? Its remote, nearly inaccessible location, perched on a narrow ridge between two sharp peaks over 2,400 meters above sea level, rules out the idea of it being a typical city or a major population center. The journey to get there is arduous even today. This wasn't a place for ordinary life. It was a place for something special. The architecture itself offers the first clues. The Inca were masters of what is known as ashlar masonry, cutting stones so precisely that they fit together without any mortar whatsoever. The walls of Machu Picchu are a testament to this genius, having withstood centuries of earthquakes that would topple modern buildings. The complex is meticulously divided into distinct sectors: agricultural terraces that cling to the mountainside, a residential area for elites, and a stunning sacred district filled with structures of obvious spiritual significance. One of the most prominent theories, popularized by Hiram Bingham himself, is that Machu Picchu was a sacred sanctuary, a retreat for the most important Inca religious figures, the Virgins of the Sun. This idea was partly based on the initial analysis of human remains found at the site, which Bingham believed were predominantly female. However, later, more thorough archaeological analysis showed the skeletons represented a much more balanced mix of men and women, challenging the notion of it being an exclusively female religious enclave. Yet the spiritual aura of the place is undeniable. The Intihuatana stone, a beautifully carved ritual stone tied to the sun, stands as one of the most sacred and intact examples of its kind. Spanish conquistadors systematically destroyed these stones throughout the empire, believing them to be idolatrous, but this one, hidden high in the mountains, escaped their notice. Its name translates to the hitching post of the sun, and it is believed to have been used in ceremonies to ensure the sun's return during the winter solstice. A second, equally compelling theory posits that Machu Picchu was a luxurious royal estate, a private country retreat for the great Inca Emperor Pachacuti, the ruler who dramatically expanded the empire and whose name means "he who shakes the earth." We know from Spanish chronicles that Inca rulers had multiple private estates across their domain. The exquisite stonework, the presence of specialized buildings, and the overall layout align with this idea. It would have been a place for the emperor and his court to retreat from the capital of Cusco, to relax, to host important guests, and to perform ceremonies that reinforced his divine status. The combination of luxurious accommodation, spiritual spaces, and breathtaking views certainly supports the idea of a royal getaway. Yet another line of thinking suggests a more practical astronomical purpose. The Incas were sophisticated astronomers, and the positioning of key buildings at Machu Picchu is no accident. The Temple of the Sun, for example, features a window that is perfectly aligned to capture the first rays of the sun during the June solstice, illuminating a ceremonial stone within. This precise celestial alignment indicates that tracking the sun's movement was a critical function, essential for governing the agricultural cycle and religious calendar. It's possible that the site served as a sophisticated observatory, a place where priest astronomers could monitor the heavens and dictate the rhythms of Inca society. The greatest challenge to solving this mystery is the Incas' own lack of a written language as we know it. They recorded information using a complex system of knotted cords called quippers, but the code to fully understanding them has been lost. Without written records, historians are left to piece together the story from archaeology, from the often biased accounts of Spanish chroniclers, and from the rich oral traditions of the Quechua people who are the direct descendants of the Inca. This absence makes every carved stone, every building alignment, and every artifact found on the site a crucial piece of a giant, silent puzzle. The true answer likely lies in a combination of all these theories. Machu Picchu was probably not just one thing but many: a royal estate, a spiritual center, an astronomical observatory, and a stunning display of imperial power, a statement carved in stone that the Inca could tame even the most wild and majestic landscapes. Its enduring power comes from this very ambiguity. It is a blank canvas upon which we can project our awe, a place that reminds us that some of history's most beautiful answers are forever wrapped in elegant, misty questions. Now we voyage over 2,000 miles into the vast, open Pacific, to one of the most remote inhabited islands on Earth. This is Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island, a place whose very name has become synonymous with mystery and isolation. Here, scattered across the grassy slopes of an extinct volcano, stand the Moai, nearly 900 colossal stone figures, their stern, elongated faces gazing stoically inland, their backs perpetually turned to the ocean. Carved from compressed volcanic ash between the 13th and 16th centuries, these statues are the breathtaking achievement of the Rapa Nui people. But they are also the centerpiece of one of archaeology's most gripping puzzles, a mystery that encompasses not only how they were made and moved, but also the tragic story of the society that created them. The first question that strikes any visitor is the most obvious: how on earth did they do it? The Moai are not small. The average statue stands about 13 feet tall and weighs a staggering 14 tons. But that's just the average. The largest Moai ever erected, named Paro, stands over 30 feet tall and weighs closer to 80 tons. That's heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck. And the raw material for these giants came from a single source, the volcanic crater of Rano Raraku. The quarry, there is a surreal landscape, littered with nearly 400 Moai in various stages of completion, as if the workers simply downed tools and walked away one day. So the challenge is twofold. How did they carve these behemoths using only stone hand tools called toki? And more impressively, how did they transport them across miles of rugged, hilly terrain to stone platforms called ahu on the coast? For decades, the prevailing theory involved a Herculean effort of log rolling. The idea was that the Rapa Nui felled trees to create a network of rollers and sledges, painstakingly dragging the statues horizontally across the island. This theory, while logical, became deeply intertwined with a larger, more ominous narrative about the island's fate. It suggested that this very process, the insatiable consumption of trees for statue transport, led to catastrophic deforestation, which in turn triggered soil erosion, crop failure, and a total societal collapse. It was a powerful and cautionary tale of ecological self-destruction. But what if that story is wrong? A fascinating alternative theory emerged, championed by researchers like archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo. They proposed a method that was far more elegant, efficient, and required far fewer resources. Instead of dragging the statues flat, what if the Rapa Nui walked them? In experimental tests, teams using only strong ropes and a coordinated rocking motion have successfully walked a concrete replica Moai upright across a field. The concept is surprisingly simple, with one team pulling the statue forward with ropes at the top and another team guiding and stabilizing the base from behind. The Moai can be rocked from side to side, edging its way forward with each tilt. This method would not only explain the lack of need for vast numbers of logs, but also account for the many broken moai found along ancient road statues that likely tipped over and shattered during this precarious walking process. This theory paints a picture of the Rapa Nui not as reckless environmental destroyers, but as clever engineers who solved a monumental logistics problem with ingenuity and rhythm. Yet, the mystery of the Moai extends beyond mere mechanics to their profound purpose. Why go to such extraordinary lengths? The prevailing belief is that the Moai were not gods, but deified representations of powerful ancestors. Each statue, once completed, was placed on a sacred Ahu platform facing inward toward the community, not out to sea. In this way, the watchful eyes of the ancestors were believed to project spiritual power, known as mana, over the living, ensuring the prosperity and protection of the village and its resources. The final touch, now lost to time, was the placing of coral and red stone eyes into the sockets of the statues, truly bringing them to life. This was an entire culture's spiritual belief system made manifest in stone, a physical connection to the past that legitimized the power of the present. This brings us to the island's ultimate tragedy. By the time European explorers first arrived in the 18th century, the society was in a state of severe decline. The once thriving population had dwindled, the statue building had ceased entirely, and many of the moai had been deliberately toppled from their platforms. The traditional story, as we mentioned, blames this collapse on the people themselves, on their obsession with building moai at the expense of their environment. However, newer evidence suggests a more complex and devastating series of events. While deforestation certainly played a role, the real death knell for the Rapa Nui was likely the arrival of Europeans, who brought with them diseases for which the islanders had no immunity, along with the horrors of the slave trade that abducted thousands. The toppling of the moai likely wasn't an act of environmental regret, but one of civil war and social upheaval, a rejection of the old ancestor-based power structures in a time of unimaginable crisis and suffering. The moai of Easter Island, therefore, stand for more than just an engineering marvel. They are a powerful dual symbol. On one hand, they represent the absolute pinnacle of human innovation, a testament to what a small, isolated community can achieve with nothing but determination, belief, and stone tools. On the other hand, they serve as a solemn and enduring warning about the fragility of society in the face of environmental change and external shock. They challenge us to look beyond simple stories of self-destruction and to understand the nuanced, often heartbreaking realities of cultural contact and collapse. These silent stone sentinels ask us not just how they moved, but what their stillness ultimately means for us all. From the isolated mystery of Easter Island we now travel to the high plateau of central Mexico, to a city so grand and so deliberately planned that it feels less like a ruin and more like a grand cosmic diagram etched into the earth. This is Teotihuacan, a name that means the place where the gods were created, a title given to it by the Aztecs who stumbled upon its empty, awe-inspiring grandeur centuries after it had already been abandoned. At its peak around 400 years after the Common Era, this was one of the largest cities on the entire planet, home to over 100,000 people, a bustling, vibrant, and unimaginably powerful metropolis that dominated ancient Mesoamerica. Walking down its central artery, the massive Avenue of the Dead, with the towering Pyramid of the Sun looming on your right and the Pyramid of the Moon anchoring the northern end, you are struck by an overwhelming sense of intentionality. This was not a city that simply grew. It was a city that was designed, a breathtaking urban project executed on a scale that is difficult to comprehend even today. And this is where the first great mystery begins. Who were the masterminds behind this colossal achievement? Unlike the Maya to the south, the people of Teotihuacan left behind no decipherable written records. Their language, their name for themselves, even what they called their own city, all of it is lost to time. The Aztecs, who revered the site as a sacred place of origin, believed it was built by gods, not mortals. Modern archaeology has had to piece together the story from the stones themselves, and the evidence points to a remarkably diverse and cosmopolitan society. Artifacts and mural styles found at the site suggest distinct ethnic neighborhoods or barrios for people from Oaxaca, the Maya regions, and the Gulf Coast. This indicates that Teotihuacan was a powerful magnet, a melting pot of Mesoamerican cultures drawn to its economic and spiritual power, but who provided the central, unifying vision. Was it a single, dominant ethnic group, or was it a collective effort, a shared dream given form in stone and mortar? The silence is deafening, and the architects remain anonymous. The city's layout only deepens the intrigue, suggesting a purpose that was far more than just administrative or residential. The entire urban plan seems to be a massive, three-dimensional model of a cosmic belief system. The orientation of the Avenue of the Dead is offset from true north by exactly 15.5 degrees, an alignment that is far too precise to be accidental. Some scholars argue this axis was carefully chosen to track the Pleiades star cluster as it set on the horizon, a celestial event of profound importance throughout Mesoamerica. The Pyramid of the Sun itself is not just a random mound. Its dimensions and proportions appear to encode specific mathematical and calendrical cycles important to ancient astronomy. Even the placement of the smaller Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, with its stunning, intricate carvings of the god Quetzalcoatl, seems to be part of this grand design. This has led many to see Teotihuacan not just as a city, but as a sacred geography, a physical portal designed to harmonize human activity with the rhythms of the universe. It was likely the ultimate pilgrimage site, a place where people came from across the continent to participate in rituals that ensured the continued movement of the sun and the very stability of the world. This spiritual power was almost certainly matched by immense economic might. The city was an industrial powerhouse on an ancient scale. Archaeologists have discovered enormous workshops, entire districts dedicated to a single craft. There were places where thousands of artisans mass-produced pottery using advanced techniques, others where they expertly worked obsidian, the volcanic glass sharper than modern surgical steel, into blades, tools, and ritual objects. This wasn't just for local use. Teotihuacano goods have been found in elite graves from the Maya lowlands to the deserts of northern Mexico. The city sat at the heart of a vast trade network, its influence spreading not through a traditional military empire, but through the soft power of commerce, ideology, and religious prestige. It was the New York or Shanghai of its day, a global city where ideas, goods, and people converged. Yet for all its glory and power, Teotihuacan's story ends abruptly. Around the year 550, something catastrophic happened. Evidence points to a violent and deliberate end. In the city's core, major temples and civic buildings were systematically burned and destroyed. The sculptures on the Temple of the Feathered Serpent were defaced and smashed. Most chillingly, excavations have revealed mass graves containing the bodies of over 200 young men, their hands tied behind their backs, who were seemingly sacrificed and then tossed into a pit as part of this final act of destruction. Was this evidence of a bloody internal revolt, an uprising of the city's poor and disenfranchised against a ruling elite that had grown too powerful? Or was it an invasion from the outside, a conquest by a rival city that sought to erase the source of Teotihuacan's power? Some scientists point to environmental clues, suggesting that a prolonged drought may have strained resources and shattered the social contract, leading to chaos. The truth is, we may never know the exact trigger. What we see is the result. A magnificent city, the heart of the ancient world, was methodically ripped apart and left to the elements. Its people scattered, its name was forgotten, and its grand cosmic blueprint was slowly reclaimed by the earth, leaving only silent, monumental questions for the Aztecs and for us to wonder at. Leaving behind the wide avenues and cosmic alignments of Teotihuacan, our journey now takes us into the heart of another desert, to a city that feels not so much built as it does sculpted by the very hands of the wind and sand. This is Petra, a name that means rock in Greek, and it is a title that could not be more fitting. Carved directly into the vibrant red, pink, and orange sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan, Petra is a marvel of human ingenuity that feels both impossibly ancient and breathtakingly alive. For centuries, its existence was little more than a legend in the West, a fabled city lost to the sands, until the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as an Arab scholar, persuaded local guides to lead him to it in 1812. What he found was the capital of the mysterious Nabateans, a nomadic Arab tribe who, between roughly 400 years before the Common Era and 106 years after, transformed themselves from desert wanderers into the masters of one of the most lucrative trade networks the ancient world had ever seen. The first and most pressing question when you stand in the arid valley that houses Petra is a simple one of survival. How did a city of perhaps 20,000 people not just survive but truly flourish in the middle of such a parched landscape? The answer lies not in what the Nabateans built above ground, but in what they engineered beneath it. They were nothing short of hydrological geniuses. In a region that might see only a few inches of rain a year, and often in sudden, devastating flash floods, the Nabateans created a complex and sophisticated water management system that would be the envy of many modern cities. They carved hundreds of miles of channels and pipelines directly into the cliff faces, diverting precious rainwater from every possible catchment area. They constructed massive underground cisterns to store millions of gallons of water, and they lined their channels with a special, impermeable cement to prevent seepage and evaporation. Most impressively, they designed an elaborate system of dams and diversion tunnels to control the deadly winter floods, transforming a destructive force of nature into a life-giving resource. This mastery over water allowed them to support not only a large population but also lush gardens, public baths, and even ornate fountains that once graced the courtyards of their grandest buildings. Petra's success was not in spite of the desert, but because of it. Their control over the single most valuable commodity in the region gave them unparalleled power and wealth. That wealth is most visibly on display in the city's stunning architecture, and no single structure is more iconic than the building known as Al-Kosneh, or the Treasury. Immortalized in film and photography, its ornate, towering facade is the first thing visitors see after winding their way through the narrow, dark canyon known as the Sick. For generations, it was romantically believed to be a temple, its name deriving from the local Bedouin legend that an Egyptian pharaoh had hidden his treasure in the stone urn carved at its very top. The truth, revealed by archaeological excavation, is both more practical and equally fascinating. The treasury was almost certainly a royal tomb, an elaborate mausoleum for one of the Nabatean kings. Its breathtaking design is a powerful statement of Petra's unique position in the ancient world. The facade is a masterful blend of architectural styles. You can see the grandeur of Hellenistic Greece in its Corinthian columns and pediments, the influence of ancient Egypt in the eagle-headed griffins and figures of Isis, and a distinct Eastern sensibility in the overall execution. This was not mere imitation. It was a deliberate and confident synthesis, a way for the Nabatean elite to project their sophistication, their cosmopolitan connections, and their power to the caravans and diplomats who arrived from every corner of the known world. Petra was a cultural crossroads, and its art and architecture served as a visual language communicating its status as a major international player. And what a crossroads it was. Petra sat at the nexus of several critical trade routes, the most famous being the incense route, which transported frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the eager markets of the Mediterranean. The Nabateans didn't just facilitate this trade, they controlled it, taxing the caravans and providing protection, water, and lodging in return. The city became a vast, open-air marketplace where spices, silks, ivory, and exotic animals changed hands, generating immense profits that funded the carving of this entire city from the rock. This incredible economic engine, however, would also be the source of its eventual decline. In 106 years after the Common Era, the Roman Emperor Trajan formally annexed the Nabatean kingdom, turning it into the province of Arabia Petraea. While this brought a new wave of Roman construction, including a colonnaded street and a massive theater that could seat thousands, it also spelled the beginning of the end for Petra's unique advantage. The Romans shifted the main trade routes north, favoring routes that could be more easily controlled by their legions, and that made use of newly built Roman roads leading directly to Mediterranean ports. Petra was slowly bypassed by the economic currents that had once been its lifeblood. To make matters worse, a devastating earthquake in the year 363 shattered much of the city's infrastructure. While it was partially rebuilt, it never regained its former glory. Later, changes in trade and the rise of sea-based commerce further isolated it, and eventually, the city was abandoned by all but local nomadic shepherds, fading into myth and legend until its dramatic rediscovery. Even today, with Petra being one of the most studied archaeological sites on Earth, it holds its secrets close. The famous treasury facade is just that, a facade. The interior is a single, large, plain chamber. The real mysteries of Petra likely lie hidden behind hundreds of other, less photographed tomb entrances dotting the cliffs, and deep within the countless unexplored chambers and tunnels that worm their way through the bedrock. Recent surveys using satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have revealed evidence of large, previously unknown structures buried beneath the sand, and even potential royal tombs that have yet to be excavated. Each new discovery promises to peel back another layer of the narrative of this rose-red city, a narrative written in stone, water, and sand, a permanent testament to the power of innovation and the inevitable shifts of fortune that rewrite the maps of the world. Yet even as we marvel at the engineering and artistry of Angkor Wat, we are drawn to its deeper purpose, a purpose that seems to reach beyond the earth and into the heavens. This was never meant to be just a temple. It was conceived as nothing less than a physical representation of the entire Hindu cosmos. The entire complex is a massive stone-scale model of Mount Meru, the mythical five-peaked mountain at the center of the universe, home to the gods. The five central towers represent those peaks, rising dramatically to symbolize a connection between the earthly and the divine. The massive moat surrounding the temple is not just for defense or water management. It represents the cosmic ocean that encircles the world. Every step a pilgrim took, moving from the outer walls toward the central sanctuary, was a symbolic journey from the outer world of illusion into the inner heart of spiritual reality. This cosmological blueprint is made even more profound by its precise astronomical alignments. On the spring equinox, an observer standing at the western entrance can witness the sun rising directly over the central tower, a breathtaking event that appears to crown the sacred mountain with light. This was a place designed to harmonize human existence with the divine order of the universe, a machine for worship built to last for eternity. The staggering ambition of this project forces us to ask how it was even possible. The scale of labor and resources required is almost beyond calculation. The temple is constructed from an estimated 5 to 10 million sandstone blocks, each one quarried from a mountain more than 25 miles away and transported along a network of canals. The bas-reliefs that stretch for almost half a mile around the lowest level are not mere decorations. They are a sprawling epic narrative carved in stone, depicting intricate scenes from Hindu mythology, historical processions of King Suryavarman II, and vast celestial armies. The carving is so fine and so detailed that it had to have been the work of master artisans, not just common laborers. This implies a society with a highly stratified and specialized workforce, including stonemasons, sculptors, architects, engineers, and logistics coordinators on a massive scale. The entire endeavor was a statement of ultimate power, funded by the immense wealth of a kingdom that controlled vast rice surpluses and dominated trade across Southeast Asia. Angkor Wat was the ultimate expression of the king's divine authority, a project meant to legitimize his rule on earth and ensure his place among the gods after death. For centuries, the prevailing narrative held that this magnificent city was abandoned in the 15th century after a sudden invasion by the neighboring Ayutthaya kingdom, its grand canals and reservoirs left to be swallowed by the relentless jungle. However, groundbreaking modern technology is completely rewriting this story. The use of LiDAR, a laser scanning technology that can see through dense forest canopy, has revealed that Angkor Wat was not a standalone temple in an isolated jungle. It was the dazzling core of a sprawling, low-density metropolis that covered an area larger than modern-day Los Angeles. The scans uncovered a vast and sophisticated urban network of roads, canals, ponds, and even previously unknown temples, all arranged in a complex grid pattern. This discovery reveals Angkor to be one of the most extensive pre-industrial settlements in human history, a feat of urban planning that supported a population of perhaps 750,000 people at its zenith. The city's decline, rather than being a sudden collapse, now appears to have been a much more gradual process of adaptation. The LiDAR evidence, combined with studies of tree rings and sediment cores, points to a more complex and nuanced end. The Khmer Empire's existence was predicated on its masterful, yet incredibly delicate water management system. A series of prolonged and intense droughts in the 14th century, followed by periods of devastating monsoon floods, would have placed an unbearable strain on this intricate hydraulic network. The very system that allowed the city to flourish may have become its greatest vulnerability. Faced with this environmental instability, coupled with shifting trade routes that diminished their economic power and the growing influence of Theravada Buddhism, which emphasized individual enlightenment over the god-king ideology that built Angkor, the elite likely made a conscious decision to gradually shift their power center closer to the coast. The people didn't just vanish, they adapted, and their legacy evolved. Angkor Wat, therefore, stands as a timeless lesson in the interplay of human ambition and environmental reality. It challenges us to consider the sustainability of even our greatest achievements, reminding us that a civilization's true strength may lie not just in its power to build, but in its wisdom to adapt when the world around it changes. Imagine the sheer shock felt by those farmers in 1974, digging a well in China's Shaanxi province when their shovels struck not water, but the hardened clay head of a silent, stoic soldier staring back at them from the earth. They had accidentally stumbled upon one of the most spectacular archaeological discoveries of all time, the Terracotta Army, a vast, underground legion built to accompany China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, into the afterlife. This was no ordinary burial offering. This was an entire military division, frozen in time, consisting of an estimated 8,000 life-sized soldiers, along with hundreds of chariots and horses, each one crafted with an astonishing level of individual detail around 210 years before the Common Era. The scale is almost impossible to grasp until you stand in the excavation pits and see row upon row of these figures, their painted uniforms now faded but their determined expressions still clear, standing in battle formation for over 2 millennia, waiting for a command that would never come. The most immediate and awe-inspiring aspect of this army is its breathtaking individuality. This is not a case of mass production using a handful of molds. While the bodies were created from a limited set of basic templates, the heads were all sculpted separately and then personalized with unique facial features, hairstyles, mustaches, and expressions. You can see young, eager recruits alongside grizzled, veteran officers. There are soldiers from different regions of China with distinct ethnic features. Some figures kneel as archers, others stand as infantrymen, and still others serve as charioteers or cavalrymen, each pose meticulously crafted for their specific role. This incredible attention to detail does more than just showcase the advanced craftsmanship of the Qin dynasty artisans. It provides an unprecedented window into the actual imperial army that unified China. The terracotta figures are a mirror reflecting the real soldiers' armor, their weaponry, their ranks, and even their diverse backgrounds, offering historians a tangible record of military organization that written records alone could never provide. But this remarkable realism only deepens the central mystery of their purpose. Why go to such extravagant, almost unimaginable lengths? The answer lies in the mind of the emperor they were built to serve. Qin Shi Huang was a man of monumental ambition and equally monumental paranoia. He was the ruler who first unified China's warring states into a single empire, standardizing everything from currency and writing to the axle width of cards. He was also utterly obsessed with defeating the one enemy he could not conquer, death. He spent much of his life and immense resources searching for elixirs of immortality, sending expeditions to mythical mountains and consuming potions that likely contained mercury, which may have ultimately contributed to his demise. Faced with the inevitability of his own end, he commissioned this terracotta army as a plan B, a way to continue his rule in the afterlife. In ancient Chinese belief, the afterlife was a direct reflection of the earthly one, and a ruler would need his armies to maintain his power and defend against spirits in the next world. These clay soldiers were not mere sculptures. They were functional, spiritual guardians, an eternal security detail for an emperor who could not bear the thought of his power ever ending. This leads us to the greatest and most tantalizing mystery of all, one that remains completely untouched by modern archaeology: the emperor's actual tomb itself. The Terracotta army is not the main event. They are merely the outer guardians, the protectors of the perimeter. Historical texts written a century after the emperor's death describe his burial mound, a large man-made hill that still stands about a mile away from the army pits, as containing a spectacular subterranean palace. They speak of ceilings inlaid with pearls to simulate the night sky, and rivers of flowing mercury to represent the great waters of China. Modern scientific surveys have provided startling evidence that these ancient tales might be more than just legend. Soil tests around the tomb mound have consistently revealed exceptionally high levels of mercury contamination, lending credible support to the descriptions of those mercury rivers. This discovery is the primary reason the central tomb has remained sealed and unexcavated. The potential toxicity is a major concern, but even more pressing is the fear that our current archaeological technology is simply not advanced enough to safely excavate it. If the tomb was indeed sealed to protect its contents from grave robbers, the sudden introduction of oxygen could cause priceless artifacts, silks, paintings, wooden objects, even the emperor's own remains, to disintegrate within moments, turning a moment of discovery into an irreversible tragedy. So, what incredible secrets might still be hidden inside? Beyond the potential mercury rivers and pearl constellations, could we find the complete bureaucratic records of his empire written on bamboo slips? Could we find the bodies of his concubines and ministers, who historical accounts suggest were entombed with him, or perhaps even the elusive recipes for the immortality elixirs he so desperately sought? The unopened tomb of Qin Shi Huang is the ultimate unread chapter of this story, a locked door behind which lies the full truth of his ambition and his legacy. The Terracotta army, for all its grandeur, is merely the prologue. It stands as a powerful testament to one man's ego, a civilization's incredible organizational skill, and the universal human struggle to grapple with mortality. These silent soldiers continue their vigil, not just protecting their emperor, but also guarding the thin, fragile line that separates the solid ground of history from the shimmering, mercury-laced whispers of legend. Emerging from the low, dense jungle of the Yucatan Peninsula, the grand structures of Chichen Itza stand as a powerful testament to a civilization that mastered the heavens, the earth, and the brutal realities of power. This was far more than just another Mayan city. For a time, it was the dazzling epicenter of the entire region, a place where science, spirituality, and politics fused into a single, awe-inspiring force. Its timeline is a story of shifting dominance, rising to prominence around 600 years after the Common Era, and reaching its peak as a regional capital between 900 and 1200. A period that saw it absorb influences from far and wide to create a unique and powerful cultural synthesis. Walking through its sprawling complex today, you are immediately struck by the sheer diversity of its architecture, a physical record of the different hands and minds that shaped its destiny. You see the classic Puuc style with its intricate mosaic stonework, standing alongside structures that show a clear influence from central Mexico, evidence of the Toltec people who arrived and profoundly influenced the city's direction. This blending of styles tells us that Chichen Itza was not an isolated Mayan stronghold but a cosmopolitan hub, a melting pot of ideas that attracted traders, pilgrims, and warriors from across Mesoamerica. At the very heart of this convergence, both physically and symbolically, stands El Castillo, also known as the Temple of Kukulkan. This magnificent step pyramid is a masterpiece of ancient engineering and astronomical precision, a four-sided monument with 91 steps on each side. When you add the single step of the top platform, you get 365 steps in total, one for each day of the solar year. But its most breathtaking feature reveals itself only twice a year during the spring and autumn equinoxes. As the sun sets on these specific days, a mesmerizing play of light and shadow unfolds. The corner of the pyramid's step terraces casts a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase, slithering alongside the stone carvings of serpent heads at the base. For a few magical minutes, this creates the illusion of a massive, undulating feathered serpent, the god Kukulkan, descending from the heavens to earth. This was not a lucky accident. It was a meticulously calculated demonstration of the priest astronomer's profound understanding of the sun's cycles, a way to make the divine tangibly present for the thousands of spectators who would have gathered to witness this sacred event. It was the ultimate fusion of science and spectacle, a public display of knowledge that reinforced the power of the ruling elite, who positioned themselves as the essential intermediaries between the people and the gods. This interplay between life, death, and the divine is further illustrated by two of Chichen Itza's most evocative sites. The Great Ball Court, the largest and most impressive of its kind in all of Mesoamerica, is a vast, eye-shaped arena with towering walls. Here, teams played a ritual sport that was far more than just a game. Using only their hips, elbows, and knees, players attempted to propel a heavy rubber ball through stone rings set high on the walls. The acoustics of the court are so perfect that a whisper at one end can be clearly heard at the other, suggesting the games were accompanied by elaborate ceremony. For the Maya, this game was a reenactment of cosmic mythology, often symbolizing the struggle between the forces of light and darkness, life and death. While popular legend often claims the losing team's captain was sacrificed, iconography at the court suggests it may have actually been the winning captain who was offered to the gods, the ultimate honor, a direct passage to the afterlife for a revered hero. This complex relationship with sacrifice is made even more tangible at the sacred cenote, a vast natural sinkhole that provided the city with its most vital resource, water. But this deep, dark pool was also a gateway to the underworld, known as Xibalba. For centuries, priests conducted ceremonies here, offering precious objects of gold, jade, and carved incense, as well as human sacrifices to appease the rain god Chak. Archaeological dredging of the cenote has confirmed these grim rituals, uncovering the remains of individuals, often children, whose sacrifice was deemed necessary to ensure the rains would come and the city would survive. This reliance on a fragile water source, the cenote, may hold a key to one of the greatest mysteries not just of Chichen Itza, but of the entire Maya world, the widespread collapse of their great cities. While Chichen Itza endured longer than many of its southern counterparts, its own eventual decline and shift in power to Mayapan remains a subject of intense debate. For decades, the dominant theory pointed to catastrophic warfare, pointing to evidence of burned structures and defensive walls. Others point to a severe and prolonged drought that gripped the Yucatan Peninsula, a theory supported by geological data showing periods of extreme aridity that would have devastated maize-based agriculture and strained the city's water reserves to the breaking point. It's likely that the truth involves a devastating feedback loop, environmental stress leading to food shortages, which in turn fueled social unrest, political instability, and intensified warfare over dwindling resources. The intricate social contract that bound the people to their divine rulers would have shattered if those rulers could no longer reliably call upon the gods for rain. The stones of Chichen Itza, therefore, tell a story of brilliant adaptation and synthesis, but also one of profound vulnerability. They challenge us to see ancient societies not as monolithic or static, but as dynamic and complex entities that brilliantly balanced knowledge, faith, and power until the delicate equilibrium was lost, leaving behind a majestic ruin that continues to whisper urgent lessons about resilience and the fragile foundations of civilization. But the story of Pompeii is far more than a simple tale of a town buried in ash. For centuries, the prevailing image was one of suffocation, of a populace slowly entombed by a relentless fall of pumice and volcanic debris. This narrative has been profoundly rewritten by modern forensic science. While the initial phase of the eruption did indeed rain down lightweight pumice stones, allowing many to flee, those who remained or sought shelter for too long met a far more instantaneous and gruesome end. The game-changing discovery came from analyzing the poses of the famous body casts. Many victims were found in a peculiar position known as the pugilistic stance, with limbs contorted and flexed, a posture not typical of someone slowly suffocating. Scientists now understand this was caused by muscle contraction from extreme heat. The pyroclastic surge, a terrifying, superheated wave of gas and ash that raced down the mountain at hundreds of miles per hour, literally cooked the victims where they stood, vaporizing soft tissue and causing instant death. The ash that settled around them then hardened, creating the hollow cavities that archaeologists later filled with plaster to create the haunting casts we see today. This grim revision transforms our understanding of the disaster from a slow-motion tragedy to a catastrophic, blink and you miss it event, a stark reminder of a volcano's most deadly weapon. This unparalleled preservation offers a window into Roman life so clear it feels almost voyeuristic. Walking its stone streets, you can still see the deep ruts worn by chariot wheels in the paving stones, a physical record of centuries of traffic. You can step into a bakery and see the petrified loaves of bread left in the oven, or into a tavern and see the price of wine scratched onto a wall. The city is covered in political campaign graffiti, love notes, and crude jokes, the voices of ordinary people echoing across 2 millennia. We know exactly what they ate from the carbonized remains of figs, nuts, and eggs found in the kitchens. We can study their intricate plumbing systems, their sophisticated public baths, and the vibrant frescoes that adorned even modest homes. This incredible detail provides a democratized view of history, focusing not just on emperors and generals, but on the shopkeeper, the slave, the baker, and the child. It allows historians to reconstruct the rhythms of daily life, the economy, and the social structures of a Roman provincial town with a level of intimacy that is simply impossible at any other site in the world. Yet, this very intimacy forces us to confront a complex and ongoing ethical dilemma. The body casts are Pompeii's most powerful and emotionally charged artifacts. They are not statues, they are the voids left by real human beings in their final moments of agony. Displaying these figures raises difficult questions about dignity, respect for the dead, and the line between education and spectacle. Is it right to display a cast of a child huddled next to their parent for the gaze of millions of tourists? Should these somber moments of death be a backdrop for selfies? The debate is ongoing, with many arguing that these casts are a vital tool for empathy, making the abstract horror of the disaster painfully real and human, while others advocate for a more restrained and respectful presentation. Pompeii compels us to consider our responsibility as observers of tragedy and the ethics of archaeological display. This leads to another curious aspect of its history. Why was this perfectly preserved city left buried and forgotten for over 1,500 years? After the eruption, the site was actually looted for valuable materials like marble and bronze, and there were some half-hearted attempts at recovery, but the sheer depth of the debris, up to 20 feet in some places, made large-scale reclamation impractical. The area was eventually abandoned, its name and location fading from memory. It wasn't systematically excavated until the 18th century, when it was rediscovered by engineers digging a canal. The delay, while frustrating for history, was ironically a blessing. It meant that Pompeii was unearthed in an era more capable of appreciating and studying its remains, rather than being plundered for treasure or built over in antiquity. The nearby city of Naples grew and thrived, its inhabitants living literally on top of other buried Roman towns like Herculaneum, largely unaware of the silent, frozen world beneath their feet. This long slumber ensured that when Pompeii finally awoke, it could tell its story in full, a story that continues to evolve with every new excavation, reminding us of the breathtaking fragility of human achievement in the face of nature's immense and unpredictable power. High on the sun-baked plateaus of southwestern Colorado, a different kind of ancient wonder awaits, one that speaks not of towering pyramids or grand plazas, but of a profound and intimate relationship between a people and their landscape. This is Mesa Verde, a place whose name means green table in Spanish, a reference to the lush juniper and pinyon pine forests that blanket its high flatlands. But the true marvel lies not on the mesa tops, but hidden within the vast, sweeping canyons that cut through them. Here, tucked under massive, overhanging sandstone cliffs, are the breathtaking architectural achievements of the ancestral Pueblo people, intricate multi-story villages built directly into the alcoves of the rock face. These are not simple caves or temporary shelters. They are sophisticated apartment complexes with over 100 rooms and ceremonial kivas, constructed between the years 600 and 1300 of the Common Era. To stand in the silent, sun-dappled courtyard of Cliff Palace, the largest such dwelling, is to be struck by an overwhelming sense of both awe and mystery. The immediate, pressing question that comes to mind is not just how they built this, but more importantly, why they chose to build here, in such seemingly inaccessible and precarious places. The journey to these cliff dwellings is a physical one, requiring descents down steep paths and ladders, which immediately suggests one of the most compelling theories for their location: defense. Life on the mesa top, where the ancestral Pueblones had lived for centuries in more traditional pit houses and later Pueblo-style villages, was exposed. The 13th century was a time of significant change and potential unrest across the region. Could these cliffside fortresses have been a response to external threats, perhaps from rival groups or migrating bands? The natural architecture of the alcoves provided a formidable defense. With only a few easily defensible entry points, a small group could hold off a much larger force. The sheer cliffs above acted as a natural roof, protecting against both the elements and projectiles launched from above. This theory paints a picture of a society seeking security, turning the canyon walls into a natural shield against a world that may have been growing increasingly uncertain and dangerous. But security is only one piece of the puzzle. Another powerful explanation looks to the very practical challenges of survival in an arid environment. These massive sandstone overhangs are brilliant examples of passive solar architecture. In the winter, when the sun is low in the sky, its rays can penetrate deep into the alcoves, providing natural warmth. In the scorching summer heat, when the sun is high overhead, the deep rock shelters remain cool and shaded. Furthermore, these alcoves acted as natural collectors of precious water. Water seeping through the porous sandstone would drip from the alcove ceilings, providing a vital, reliable source of moisture that could be channeled into clay pots or absorbed by cleverly placed gardens. By moving into the cliffs, the ancestral Pueblones were not just finding shelter, they were plugging their homes directly into the natural systems of heating, cooling, and water collection, demonstrating an incredibly sophisticated understanding of their environment and a masterful adaptation for resource conservation. We must also consider a dimension that is often harder for modern minds to grasp, but was undoubtedly central to their worldview: the spiritual. For the ancestral Puebloans, the landscape was not a separate entity to be conquered or simply utilized. It was alive, imbued with meaning and sacred power. The act of moving into the cliffs could have been a profound spiritual migration, a way to live closer to the heart of the earth. The cliff alcoves themselves might have been seen as literal portals to the underworld, the place of emergence and origin in Puebloan cosmology. Building their homes and their ceremonial kivas, the circular, underground chambers used for rituals, in these spaces would have fused their daily lives with their spiritual beliefs. Every sunrise illuminating a cliff dwelling, every drop of water from the rock, would have reinforced a sacred connection, making their entire existence a continuous act of communion with the natural world. This perspective suggests the move was not one of fear, but of deep religious significance, a conscious choice to align their community with the spiritual rhythms of the universe. For all their ingenuity in creating these stunning homes, by the end of the 13th century, the cliff dwellings were completely abandoned. The classic narrative has often been one of a sudden, catastrophic disappearance, a mystery wrapped in silence. However, the latest archaeological evidence, particularly from the science of dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, paints a far more nuanced and gradual picture. The tree ring records show a devastating 23-year megadrought that gripped the region starting in 1276, a period of extreme aridity that would have crippled agriculture on the mesa tops above. This was compounded by a significant cooling period which shortened growing seasons. These environmental pressures likely strained social ties, perhaps leading to internal conflict over dwindling resources. But the story isn't just one of collapse. The archaeological record doesn't show evidence of a violent end. Instead, we see careful, deliberate action. Doorways to rooms were often sealed shut, and valuable, portable items were taken. This points less to a panicked flight and more to a planned, strategic migration. The people of Mesa Verde didn't vanish. They likely moved south, joining their relatives and other Puebloan communities in what are now Arizona and New Mexico, taking their knowledge, their culture, and their stories with them. Their departure was not an ending, but a relocation, an adaptation to changing circumstances. This is perhaps the most important lesson Mesa Verde holds for us today. For generations, the story of indigenous peoples in North America was often told through a lens of simplicity or inevitable decline. Mesa Verde stands as a powerful counterpoint to those stereotypes. The planning, engineering, and communal effort required to build these villages speaks to a highly organized and sophisticated society. The precise stone masonry, the complex water management systems, and the clear understanding of astronomy evident in their structures all reveal a deep well of knowledge and innovation. These ruins challenge us to listen more carefully to the stories that are still told by the descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, the modern Pueblo tribes of the Southwest. Their oral histories often speak of this migration not as a failure, but as a journey, a search for a new center place. Mesa Verde is not a monument to a lost people. It is a chapter in an ongoing story of resilience, adaptation, and a deep, enduring connection to a homeland that, though left behind, was never truly forgotten. It urges us to see the land not just as a setting for history, but as a living archive, holding the stories of those who learned to live within its means, and whose legacy continues to shape the culture of the region to this day. Of all the ancient mysteries we've explored, from the silent Moai of Easter Island to the frozen streets of Pompeii, none has captured the global imagination quite like the story of a single place that may never have existed at all. We now venture into the realm of pure legend, to the 14th ruin on our list, one that is unique because it lives not in stone and mortar, but in the timeless power of story. This is the lost city of Atlantis, a tale so potent it has fueled a quest for answers for over 2 millennia, challenging the very boundaries between myth and history. The story begins with the Greek philosopher Plato, who around 360 years before the Common Era used the tale of Atlantis in 2 of his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. He didn't present it as a fable, but as a true historical account passed down through generations. According to Plato, Atlantis was a formidable naval power that lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. It was an island paradise larger than ancient Libya and Asia Minor combined, blessed with abundant resources and ruled by a confederation of kings descended from the sea god Poseidon. Its capital was a marvel of engineering, built from concentric rings of land and water, adorned with magnificent temples, palaces, and harbors teeming with ships. The Atlanteans were initially a noble, virtuous people, but over time they became corrupted by greed and power. Their ambition led them to attempt the conquest of the entire Mediterranean world, until they were finally defeated by the morally upright ancestors of the Athenians. As divine punishment for their hubris, the entire island was struck by a single, catastrophic day and night of earthquakes and floods, and sank beneath the waves, vanishing forever into the depths of the ocean. For the vast majority of historians and archaeologists, Plato's account is not a historical record but a brilliant philosophical allegory. He was a storyteller first and foremost, and he used the tale of a perfect society that destroys itself through its own moral decay as a powerful warning to his fellow Athenians about the dangers of imperialism, corruption, and turning away from the gods. The entire narrative serves as a plot device to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state and the consequences of abandoning its principles. No primary sources or physical evidence from any other ancient culture mention a civilization called Atlantis, and the incredible technological feats Plato describes far exceed the capabilities of any known Bronze Age society. From a scholarly perspective, Atlantis is a powerful myth, a thought experiment crafted by one of history's greatest minds to explore profound ethical and political questions, not a literal place waiting to be found. And yet, the human desire to find a kernel of truth in this story is utterly irresistible. This has led to centuries of speculation, with amateur sleuths and serious researchers alike proposing countless real-world locations for the lost continent. The most compelling and scientifically supported candidate is not a continent in the Atlantic, but a much smaller island much closer to Greece, the volcanic island of Santorini, known in antiquity as Thera. Around the year 1600 before the Common Era, Thera was the site of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history, an event so colossal it effectively ended the thriving Minoan civilization centered on nearby Crete. The eruption generated massive tsunamis that would have devastated coastal Minoan settlements, while a thick blanket of volcanic ash crippled agriculture and brought their sophisticated society to an abrupt halt. The Minoans were a highly advanced maritime power with elaborate palace complexes and plumbing details that loosely echo Plato's description. It is entirely plausible that tales of this sudden, cataclysmic destruction of a great seafaring culture were passed down through the centuries, eventually reaching Plato, who then embellished and magnified them into the epic tale of Atlantis. In this light, Atlantis isn't a sunken continent, but a distorted, grand memory of a very real historical disaster. This hasn't stopped the search from expanding to every corner of the globe. Over the years, passionate theorists have placed Atlantis in the Azores, the Bahamas, the Andes Mountains, and even Antarctica, often using selective interpretations of geological data or questionable readings of ancient texts to support their claims. This branch of inquiry, often called pseudo-archaeology, frequently ignores the established rules of evidence and historical context, instead favoring sensational claims that capture public attention. The enduring appeal of these theories speaks to something deeper than just a desire to solve a historical puzzle. The myth of Atlantis taps into a fundamental human fascination with cataclysm and lost golden ages. It's the idea that somewhere, long ago, there existed a society more advanced, more enlightened, and more spiritually connected than our own, a wisdom that was lost in a single, terrible moment. This narrative is incredibly powerful, offering a romantic explanation for the inequalities and mysteries of the ancient world, and serving as a cautionary tale about the fragility of our own civilization in the face of environmental or societal collapse. Ultimately, the true power of Atlantis lies not in its potential location, but in what its endless pursuit reveals about us. The story encourages critical thinking, forcing us to ask how we distinguish fact from fiction, and how our own desires and biases shape our interpretation of the past. It shows how a compelling narrative can transcend its origins, inspiring countless works of literature, art, and film, from Jules Verne to Disney. The Lost City is a mirror, reflecting our timeless yearning for a forgotten utopia, our fear of societal downfall, and our unshakable belief that the greatest mysteries are still hidden, waiting just beneath the waves of history, or perhaps just beneath the surface of our imagination. Deep within the humid embrace of northern Guatemala's rainforest, a sound echoes through the canopy that is as ancient as the stones themselves, the primordial roar of howler monkeys, a deep guttural call that seems to announce the presence of something truly majestic. This is the setting for Tikal, one of the most powerful and dominant city-states of the entire ancient Maya world. Unlike the coastal trading posts or the later northern centers like Chichen Itza, Tikal was the heart of the classic Maya lowlands, a sprawling metropolis that thrived for over 700 years, from around 200 to 900 years after the Common Era. To walk its great plaza today is to stand in the shadow of giants, literally. Temple I, the iconic pyramid known as the Temple of the Grand Jaguar, soars over 140 feet into the sky, a breathtaking testament to the ambition of its kings. But these towering structures are more than just impressive feats of engineering. They are a complex language written in stone, speaking volumes about the astronomical precision, political sophistication, and spiritual fervor that defined this incredible civilization. The most immediate and baffling question that confronts any visitor is one of sheer scale. How could a pre-industrial society without pack animals, metal tools, or the wheel possibly support an estimated population of up to 100,000 people in the middle of a tropical rainforest? The answer lies in a masterful and incredibly delicate manipulation of the environment. The Maya of Tikal were not passive inhabitants of the jungle. They were active and brilliant landscape engineers. They did not rely on large, sprawling fields of single crops, which would have quickly depleted the thin, nutrient-poor rainforest soil. Instead, they practiced a form of intensive agriculture that turned the challenges of their home into advantages. They created vast, raised field systems in the surrounding bajos, or low-lying swamps, building up plots of fertile soil above the water level to grow crops like maize, beans, and squash. In the upland areas, they practiced sophisticated agroforestry, cultivating beneficial trees alongside their crops and maintaining complex kitchen gardens. Their most ingenious innovation, however, was their water management system. In a region with a pronounced dry season, securing a reliable water supply was a matter of life and death. The people of Tikal constructed massive, plaster-lined reservoirs that could hold millions of gallons of rainwater collected during the wet season, creating a lifeline that sustained the city through months of drought. This intricate, sustainable symbiosis with a difficult environment is one of the Maya's greatest and often overlooked achievements, a testament to a deep and nuanced understanding of the natural world. The power that organized this immense effort was concentrated in a divine king, known as an Ajor, who was believed to be the crucial intermediary between the mortal realm and the world of the gods. The Grand Pyramids were not just temples, they were literally portals to the other world, and the tombs of these powerful rulers have been found buried within them, surrounded by exquisite offerings of jade pottery and carved bones. The story of Tikal is written in the dynastic history of these kings and queens, recorded on intricately carved stone monuments called stelae. These stelae provide a year-by-year account of Tikal's history, its military victories, its strategic alliances forged through marriage, and its bitter rivalries. The most famous of these was the epic struggle with the nearby city of Calakmul, a conflict that spanned over a century and involved complex shifting alliances across the Maya world. This was not simple border skirmishing. It was a cold war between two superpowers, fought for control of lucrative trade routes and the loyalty of vassal states, a political landscape as sophisticated and cutthroat as any in the ancient world. Despite this power and sophistication, Tikal, along with the entire southern Maya lowlands, experienced a profound and devastating collapse between the 8th and 9th centuries. The construction of monuments ceased, the royal palaces were abandoned, and the population plummeted. For decades, the collapse was explained by a single, simple cause, perhaps a massive peasant revolt or a single catastrophic earthquake. We now understand the truth was far more complex and, for us today, far more relevant. It was a perfect storm of interconnected crises. Decades of intense warfare recorded on those very stelae drained resources and destabilized the region. This was compounded by a series of severe multi-generational droughts, confirmed by analysis of lake sediment cores and stalagmites, which would have crippled the agricultural system and emptied those vital reservoirs. The sheer population density of the city likely led to significant deforestation and resource depletion, undermining the very ecological foundation upon which Tikal was built. The social contract between the people and their divine ruler would have shattered when those rulers could no longer reliably call upon the gods for rain. It wasn't one disaster that felled the giant, but a cascading failure of the entire system. The most revolutionary insights into this collapse have come from above. The use of LiDAR technology, which uses lasers to digitally peel away the dense jungle canopy, has revealed that Tikal was far larger and more interconnected than anyone ever dreamed. The scans showed a sprawling urban landscape with an estimated 10,000 structures, all linked by a sophisticated network of raised causeways, defensive earthworks, and terraced hillsides. This new data doesn't just show us a city, it reveals a metropolitan region, a highly modified environment that was pushed to its absolute limits. This makes the collapse not a mysterious vanishing, but an understandable, if tragic, consequence of pushing a complex society beyond the breaking point of its environment. The silence that eventually fell over the Grand Plaza was not the end of the Maya people, but the end of a specific political and social order. Many people likely migrated north to newer cities or returned to a more dispersed, village-based way of life. Tikal's haunting ruins, reclaimed by the relentless jungle, stand as a powerful and poignant monument to resilience and fragility. They force us to look at our own modern megacities, our own complex interdependencies, and our own environmental challenges, and ask a very uncomfortable question. Are we, in our own time, listening to the whispers of the past, or are we merely building louder temples, waiting for the day the howler monkeys are the only ones left to tell our story? Yet the true magic of the Forum lies not in any single building, but in the countless layers of history physically stacked one atop the other, a phenomenon that transforms it into the ultimate archaeological laboratory. Walking through the site today is like flipping through the pages of a massive stone history book. The ground level you stand on is actually the late imperial era. Beneath your feet are the remains of the Republican period, and beneath that, the very earliest layers of the marshy valley floor. Excavations have peeled back these layers to reveal a breathtaking continuity of use and adaptation. For instance, the lapis niger, a black marble slab, marks what Romans themselves believed was the possible tomb of their legendary founder, Romulus, showing how even in antiquity, the Forum was a place of revered memory. The Curia Julia, the Senate house commissioned by Julius Caesar, stands on the same site as an earlier Senate building, a physical testament to political power persisting even as regimes changed. And just a short distance away, the Temple of Caesar was built precisely on the spot where his body was cremated, turning a moment of shocking political violence into a sacred, imperial cult site. This constant building, rebuilding, and repurposing over more than 1,000 years makes the Forum a unique record of how a living city evolves, with each generation writing its own story directly on top of the last. This evolution did not stop with the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In fact, the Forum's post-imperial life is one of its most fascinating chapters. As Rome's population dwindled and the great buildings fell into disrepair, the Forum did not simply vanish. It underwent a remarkable transformation, a process known as spoliation, where the magnificent marble and stone of ancient temples were quarried for new projects. Stones from the Forum's basilicas were used to build medieval towers and fortifications. Churches were built directly into the shells of ancient temples, like the Church of Santi Cosma e Damiano, which was ingeniously inserted into the Library of Peace, and a temple dedicated to the deified Emperor Vespasian. During the Renaissance, the area was even given a new name, the Campo Vaccino, or Cow Field, as it was used for grazing livestock amidst the half-buried arches and columns. This was not an era of mere decay, but one of pragmatic reuse, where the monumental backdrop of classical power was seamlessly woven into the fabric of a new Christian Rome. It's a powerful reminder that urban spaces are never truly abandoned. They are simply adapted to serve the needs and beliefs of a new age, their legacy constantly being reinterpreted by those who come after. Ultimately, the enduring power of the Roman Forum is not just in the stories it tells about the past, but in the profound questions it forces us to ask about our own present and future. It stands as the original model for the concept of a public square, a physical space where the core activities of civic life, politics, commerce, religion, and social gathering converged and intertwined. As we walk through the ruins, we are compelled to consider the nature of power itself, how it is projected through architecture, how it is legitimized through ritual, and how it can be challenged in a public space. The Forum's long history, from vibrant hub to neglected field to protected archaeological park, mirrors the life cycle of civilizations themselves, reminding us that even the most powerful empires are not permanent. Their stone may endure, but its meaning is always shifting. In our modern world of sprawling, often impersonal cities, the Forum challenges us to think about the importance of creating and preserving central, multi-purpose public spaces that foster a sense of community, identity, and shared history. It is a laboratory of human experience, its crumbling stones echoing with lessons about how we choose to build, govern, and live together, lessons that are as urgently relevant today as they were over 2,000 years ago. Perched atop a sun-baked hill in the northeastern Peloponnese, the citadel of Mycenae commands the surrounding plains with an air of grim, unshakable authority. This was no ordinary settlement. It was the formidable nerve center of a civilization that dominated the Greek world for centuries, a culture so influential we still call this era the Mycenaean period. The first thing any visitor encounters is the primary reason for its fame and its name, the massive Lion Gate. This is the oldest monumental sculpture in all of Europe, a towering entranceway capped by a single 100-ton lintel stone, above which two majestic, though now headless, lionesses stand guard. They flank a central Minoan-style column, a powerful symbol of authority that warns all who approach that they are entering a place of immense power. The scale is immediately staggering, a declaration of strength meant to intimidate and awe. This was the gateway to a world once thought to be pure fantasy, the world sung by the poet Homer in his epic tales of the Trojan War and the bloody, tragic saga of the House of Atreus. For centuries, that's all it was, a compelling myth. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey were considered beautiful works of fiction, thrilling stories of gods and heroes, but not actual history. That all changed in the 1870s with the arrival of a wealthy, obsessed German businessman named Heinrich Schliemann. Convinced that Homer was recording actual events, Schliemann went to Turkey to dig for Troy, and he found it. Flush with that success, he turned his attention to Mycenae, guided by a line from Homer that called it a city rich in gold. In 1876, just inside the citadel walls, Schliemann discovered a circle of royal shaft graves, packed with an unimaginable treasure trove that utterly vindicated his faith in the epics. There were ornate bronze weaponry, exquisitely crafted gold jewelry, and funerary goods of astonishing richness. But the most famous find was a haunting gold funeral mask pressed over the face of a male skeleton. In a telegram that would echo through history, Schliemann famously declared, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." Of course, we now know the mask predates the traditional timeline for the Trojan War by about 300 years, so it cannot literally be the face of the legendary king. But that almost doesn't matter. Schliemann's dramatic discovery did something far more important. It shattered the boundary between legend and reality. He proved that the Mycenaeans were a very real, incredibly wealthy, and powerful civilization, and that the Homeric epics, however embellished by centuries of oral storytelling, contained a kernel of historical truth. The citadel itself, with its massive cyclopean walls, so named because later Greeks believed only the mythical one-eyed giants could have moved such enormous stones, became a physical anchor for the stories of Agamemnon, the king who led the Greek coalition to Troy to reclaim Helen. Was this his actual power base? It is entirely plausible that a powerful Wanax or king who ruled from this strategic stronghold could have been the historical inspiration for the literary character. The ruins force us to engage with a beautiful complexity, where history and myth are not opposites but intertwined strands of a single, grand narrative. The incredible wealth found at Mycenae points to a society of sophisticated warriors and traders who projected their power across the Mediterranean. Their influence stretched from southern Italy to the coast of Asia Minor and down to Egypt. They adopted and adapted ideas from the Minoans of Crete, developing a syllabic script we call Linear B, which was deciphered in the 1950s and proved to be an early form of Greek. These clay tablets, originally used for mundane palace inventories and records, provide a fascinating bureaucratic snapshot of a highly organized, centralized state that controlled the production of everything from perfumed olive oil to bronze weaponry. This was not a loose collection of tribes. It was a network of fortified palace states, with Mycenae perhaps as the first among equals, a powerful central node in a vast and interconnected web of Bronze Age trade and diplomacy. Which makes what happened next all the more mysterious and profound. Around 1200 years before the Common Era, at the very height of its power, the entire Mycenaean civilization, along with nearly every other major Bronze Age society in the Eastern Mediterranean, experienced a sudden, violent, and catastrophic collapse. The great palaces were burned and destroyed, the intricate trade networks disintegrated, and the knowledge of writing was lost for centuries. The causes of this late Bronze Age collapse remain one of history's greatest detective stories. Was it an invasion by a mysterious group the Egyptians called the Sea Peoples? Was it a series of devastating earthquakes that toppled the mighty walls? Or was it a perfect storm of interconnected disasters, prolonged drought and famine leading to internal rebellions, migration, and widespread piracy that shattered the fragile international system? The evidence points to a combination of factors, a systemic failure that left a power vacuum so complete that Greece was plunged into a centuries-long dark age, a period of poverty and isolation from which the classical Greek city-states would eventually emerge. This dramatic fall from grace is what makes Mycenae so powerfully evocative. It stands as a monumental lesson in the fragility of even the most powerful civilizations. The citadel's ruins, from the Lion Gate to the giant underground beehive-shaped tombs known as tholoi, are not just the backdrop to myths of heroism. They are the stage for a very real human story of rise and fall, of ambition and vulnerability. The stories that grew from its ashes, the epic cycles of Agamemnon's triumphant return from Troy only to be murdered by his wife Clytemnestra, the endless curse upon his house, are humanity's way of processing this trauma, of weaving a moral narrative around the inexplicable collapse of a golden age. Mycenae challenges us to listen closely, to hear in the silence of its ruins not just the clatter of bronze weapons and the whispers of heroes, but also the quieter, more sobering echoes of a world that fell apart, reminding us that the line between a golden mask and a tragic fate is often far thinner than it appears. Imagine a single building, not of stone and marble, but of parchment and papyrus, designed to hold the entire sum of human knowledge under one roof. This was the grand ambition behind the Library of Alexandria, founded in the 3rd century before the Common Era by Ptolemy I in the thriving Egyptian port city that bore Alexander the Great's name. Unlike the physical ruins we've explored, the library leaves no crumbling walls or broken statues to mark its existence. Its physical form is entirely lost to us. And yet, its absence has become one of history's most powerful and enduring ghosts, a symbol of a devastating, incalculable loss that continues to haunt our imagination. It represents the dream of universal understanding and the tragic fragility of that dream in the face of human conflict and the relentless passage of time. So what exactly was stored in this legendary repository? The scale is almost impossible to overstate. The library's mission was nothing less than to collect a copy of every known book in the world. Scholars were sent out with vast sums of money to acquire texts from every corner of the known world, from the markets of Athens to the temples of India. Ships docking in Alexandria's harbor were reportedly searched by royal guards, not for contraband but for scrolls. Any found were confiscated, copied by the library's army of scribes, and the copies were then returned to the owners while the originals were added to the great collection. Within its halls, it is believed, were the complete works of the great Greek thinkers, the plays of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the philosophical treatises of Plato and Socrates, the scientific and mathematical writings of Aristotle, which may have formed the core of the collection, and the groundbreaking geometry of Euclid, who likely worked within the library's very walls. But its scope was far wider than just Greek thought. It aimed to be a truly global archive housing translations of Egyptian medical texts, Babylonian astronomical observations, Persian religious Zoroastrian texts, and perhaps even works from farther afield. This was not merely a storage facility, it was the world's first great research university, a place where the greatest minds of the age were paid to think, to debate, to edit, and to advance human understanding in every conceivable field. The tragedy, of course, is that this incredible repository of wisdom was destroyed. But how and when? The answer is frustratingly murky, wrapped in layers of legend and conflicting historical accounts. The most famous culprit is Julius Caesar. During his civil war with Pompey the Great in 48 before the Common Era, Caesar found himself besieged in Alexandria. Historical sources report that he ordered his men to set fire to the Egyptian fleet in the harbor to prevent its use by the enemy. The flames, according to some accounts, spread from the docks and engulfed a warehouse district where a large number of scrolls, possibly intended for or duplicated by the library, were stored. Did this fire destroy the main library itself? Most scholars think it likely caused significant damage to an off-site storage area, dealing a severe blow to the collection, but not completely obliterating the institution. The story continues centuries later. In the 3rd century after the Common Era, the city saw periods of violent upheaval, including a revolt that may have involved the destruction of parts of the library under the Roman Emperor Aurelian. Then, in the 4th century, as Christianity became the dominant force in the Roman Empire, religious fervor sometimes turned against pagan institutions. Theophilus, the Patriarch of Alexandria, is recorded to have presided over the destruction of the city's main pagan temple, the Serapeum, which by that time may have housed a daughter library or a remaining portion of the original collection. This event, around 391 years after the Common Era, is another strong candidate for a final, fatal blow. Later still, in the 7th century, Arab chroniclers wrote of the Islamic conquest of Alexandria, with the Caliph Omar supposedly decreeing that if the books in the library contradicted the Quran, they were heresy and should be burned, and if they agreed with it, they were superfluous and should also be burned. However, many historians view this story as a much later invention, a piece of propaganda from centuries after the fact. The truth is, there was likely no single catastrophic event. The decline of the Library of Alexandria was probably a death by 1,000 cuts, a slow decay through neglect, sporadic violence, and the gradual fading of the scholarly mission that had once sustained it, long before any one fire could be blamed for its complete erasure. This long, slow vanishing act forces us to ask one of the most tantalizing, what-if questions in all of human history. How different would our world be if the contents of the library had survived intact? The loss is not just of known works, but of the countless unknown ones. We have only a fraction of the ancient world's literature and science. We know the titles of hundreds of lost plays by the great Greek tragedians. We have references to entire histories, scientific theories, and philosophical schools that are now completely gone. What if we had the full works of the pre-Socratic philosophers? What if we possessed the complete medical knowledge of the ancient Egyptians, or the detailed astronomical records of the Babylonians? It's possible that humanity spent centuries relearning knowledge that had already been discovered, recorded, and then lost in the ashes of Alexandria. The scientific revolution might have occurred 1,000 years earlier. Our understanding of our own past would be immeasurably richer. The library's fate is the ultimate cautionary tale about the vulnerability of knowledge itself, a reminder that progress is not inevitable and that the collective memory of our species is a fragile thing, always just one catastrophe away from being irrevocably dimmed. And that is why the ghost of the Library of Alexandria continues to drive us today. Its story is not one of passive mourning, but of active inspiration. It fuels the modern quest to recover what was lost, from scholars painstakingly reading carbonized scrolls from the volcanic ruins of Herculaneum using advanced imaging technology, to linguists working to decipher scripts that have been silent for millennia. It is the driving force behind projects like the Internet Archive and the digital preservation of everything from ancient texts to modern websites, a 21st century attempt to create a new, fireproof Library of Alexandria in the cloud. The Great Library's legacy is a permanent reminder that preserving knowledge is not a passive act of storage, but an active defense against oblivion. It challenges every generation to be the guardians of its own wisdom, to build libraries both physical and digital, and to ensure that the light of understanding once kindled is never so easily extinguished again. Now we travel even further back in time, to the banks of the mighty Indus River in what is now modern-day Pakistan, to a city that presents us with a puzzle so profound it challenges our very definitions of civilization itself. This is Mohenjo-Daro, which aptly means Mound of the Dead in the local Sindhi language, one of the principal cities of the vast and mysterious Indus Valley civilization. At its peak around 2,500 years before the Common Era, this was one of the most extensive Bronze Age cultures in the world, its influence stretching across a region larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Yet, unlike its more famous contemporaries, the Indus Valley people left behind no grand pyramids, no towering ziggurats, and no palaces filled with the treasures of boastful kings. Instead, what we find at Mohenjo-Daro is something that, in many ways, feels almost startlingly modern, a vision of urban planning and communal living that seems to defy the era in which it was built. The first thing that strikes any archaeologist studying Mohenjo-Daro is its breathtaking, almost mathematical order. This was a city built on a strict grid plan, with wide, straight main streets running north-south and east-west, intersecting to create large, uniform city blocks. This is a level of urban planning unseen elsewhere in the ancient world for another 2,000 years. But the true genius of the city lies beneath those streets. They constructed the world's first known comprehensive urban sanitation system. Almost every single house, from the largest to what appear to be the most modest, had its own dedicated bathing area and a latrine that was connected to a city-wide network of covered, brick-lined drains and sewers that ran along the main avenues. These drains were designed with clever features like manholes for maintenance and periodic sumps to trap solid waste. This was not a privilege for the elite. It was a standard feature of urban life, suggesting a remarkable collective concern for public health and hygiene that would not be matched again until the Roman era, millennia later. This obsession with water is further exemplified by the city's most famous and enigmatic structure, the Great Bath. This is a large, meticulously designed public tank, watertight from the use of finely fitted bricks and a thick layer of bitumen, a natural tar. It was surrounded by a colonnade and had rooms on all sides, with a sophisticated system for filling it with fresh water and draining it. But what was its purpose? It was clearly central to the city's life, but its exact function remains one of the great unanswered questions. Was it a ritual bathing tank for religious purification ceremonies, an early precursor to the ritual baths found in later Indian traditions? Was it a public swimming pool or a community center for social gatherings? The absence of any obvious temples in the city makes the religious explanation compelling, yet the complete lack of any statues of gods or goddesses or any clear depictions of religious iconography leaves us with only silence. The Great Bath stands as a beautiful, silent monument to a belief system we can only guess at. This leads us to the most baffling and defining characteristic of this entire civilization: its apparent lack of obvious central authority. In Egypt, we have the pharaohs. In Mesopotamia, we have the Luguls or kingly rulers. Their power is written in stone, declared in massive monuments and grand tombs. At Mohenjo-Daro, we find none of that. There is no grand royal palace, no giant statues celebrating a mighty ruler, no evidence of a dynastic hierarchy. There is a large, elevated structure that archaeologists call the citadel, but it seems to have been a public administrative or ritual center, not a royal residence. So who was in charge? The sheer uniformity of the city's planning, the standardized brick sizes used across the entire Indus region, and the consistent weight and measure systems all point to some form of incredibly effective central coordination. But it seems to have been a faceless authority, perhaps a council of elders or a guild of merchants who governed through consensus and practicality rather than the divine right of kings. This has led many scholars to speculate that the Indus Valley civilization may have been a far more collective, perhaps even egalitarian, society than any of its counterparts, a fascinating experiment in early social organization that prioritized communal well-being over individual aggrandizement. Perhaps the most frustrating mystery of all is their writing. The Indus Valley people did have a script, one that appears on thousands of small, carved soapstone seals, typically depicting animals like bulls, rhinos, and elephants, and occasionally what seem to be deity-like figures. But the inscriptions are incredibly short, usually only 4 or 5 symbols in length, and we have found no long texts, no royal decrees, no clay tablets recording economic transactions in detail. Despite decades of effort by some of the world's top linguists and cryptographers, the script remains completely undeciphered. It is one of the great locked doors of the ancient world. Without the key of a Rosetta Stone, the voices of the people of Mohenjo-Daro are silent. We cannot read their names, know their laws, or understand their stories. Those tiny, elegant symbols are a permanent tease, holding all their secrets just out of our reach. And then, around 1900 years before the Common Era, this sophisticated, stable, and widespread civilization began to decline and eventually collapse. The classic image of cities being sacked by invading Aryan hordes, a theory once popular, has been largely discarded because archaeologists have found no evidence of widespread warfare, sacked cities, or mass graves indicative of a violent end. The skeletons found in the streets of Mohenjo-Daro's final days show no signs of traumatic injury from weapons. The more likely culprits were environmental. Geological evidence suggests that the region underwent a significant shift in climate, becoming cooler and drier. The mighty Indus River, the lifeblood of the civilization, may have changed its course due to tectonic activity, or its annual floods may have become less reliable for agriculture. Some theories suggest that the Indus people's own success may have contributed to their downfall. Intensive irrigation for their massive wheat and barley fields could have salinized the soil, slowly poisoning their own breadbasket. It was likely a slow, grinding decline, a failure of the very environmental systems that had allowed them to flourish, leading to famine, a breakdown of trade networks, and a gradual abandonment of the great cities. The people did not vanish. They likely migrated eastward, their culture and traditions slowly blending with those of other groups, their grand urban experiment fading into memory, leaving behind the silent, well-planned streets of Mohenjo-Daro to ask their gentle, persistent questions about how a society can choose to organize itself and what true civilization really means. Rising dramatically from the flat top of a limestone rock, visible from almost anywhere in Athens, the Acropolis is more than just a collection of ancient ruins. It is the very soul of a city and the defining symbol of an entire civilization's golden age. This sacred rock, crowned by the majestic Parthenon, represents a breathtaking moment in human history when radical political ideas, unparalleled artistic genius, and profound religious devotion converge to create something truly timeless. Constructed in the latter half of the 5th century before the Common Era, this monumental project was a direct and defiant response to one of the most humiliating events in Athenian history. Just a few decades earlier, the invading Persian army had swept through Athens, ruthlessly sacking and burning the older temples and structures that once stood on the Acropolis. The scars of that invasion were deep, a constant reminder of vulnerability and defeat. But from those ashes, the Athenians, buoyed by their unexpected victories in the subsequent Persian wars and enriched by the treasury of the Delian League, made an audacious decision. Under the visionary leadership of the statesman Pericles, they would not simply rebuild. They would create a monument so grand, so beautiful, and so powerful that it would forever proclaim the glory of Athens and the triumph of its unique democratic spirit. The scale and speed of this construction project were nothing short of miraculous, and its funding source remains a subject of intense historical debate that goes to the very heart of Athenian politics. The official line was that this was a pious act of devotion to the city's patron goddess, Athena, but the enormous cost was largely bankrolled by the treasury of the Delian League, an alliance of Greek city-states originally formed to defend against Persia. Athens, as the League's leader, gradually moved the treasury to its own Acropolis and began using the funds for its own ambitious building program. To the other Greek states, this looked less like a pious act and more like an arrogant misappropriation of allied funds, a monumental act of embezzlement to glorify Athens itself. Pericles famously retorted that as long as Athens fulfilled its defensive obligations, it could spend its own money as it saw fit, a clever bit of political rhetoric that barely concealed the imperial power Athens was flexing. The construction itself was a marvel of organization, employing thousands of skilled artisans, laborers, and artists who worked under the supervision of the legendary sculptor Phidias and the architect Ictinus. They perfected and refined the Doric order, creating optical illusions to make the lines of the Parthenon appear perfectly straight to the human eye by subtly curving them. Every element, from the massive marble blocks hauled from nearby Mount Pentelicus to the intricate sculptures, was a testament to a society operating at the peak of its confidence and capability. But the Acropolis was far more than a display of political and economic power. It was a complex and layered piece of propaganda carved in Pentelic marble. The Parthenon was not a temple in the conventional sense, with a large inner space for worship, but rather a colossal treasury housing a 40-foot, all-gold and ivory statue of Athena Parthenos, also the work of Phidias. Its elaborate sculptural program told a story carefully crafted for both Athenian citizens and visiting diplomats. The metopes, the square panels high on the exterior, depicted the Greeks in battle against centaurs, Amazons, and giants, allegories for their victory over the barbaric Persians and a celebration of civilization's triumph over chaos. The most famous sculptures, the Parthenon marbles, once filled the continuous frieze that ran around the inner chamber. Unlike the mythical battles on the metopes, the frieze depicted a scene from everyday Athenian life, the Great Panathenaic Procession, a religious festival where citizens, not gods or heroes, were the stars of the show. This was a radical, democratic statement. By placing themselves on the temple of their patron goddess, the Athenians were making a powerful claim that their city's greatness, its culture, and its democratic values were themselves a form of divine offering, worthy of immortality in stone. The history of the Acropolis did not end with the fall of classical Athens. Its subsequent transformations add profound layers to its meaning. As religions and empires rose and fell, the Parthenon itself was continuously adapted to serve new masters. In the 6th century after the Common Era, it was converted into a Christian church dedicated to the Virgin Mary, its pagan sculptures likely defaced or removed. After the Ottoman conquest in the 15th century, it became a mosque, complete with a minaret added to one corner. Its most devastating moment came in 1687, when it was being used as an Ottoman gunpowder storehouse during a siege by the Venetians. A cannonball struck the building, triggering a massive explosion that blew out the central portion of the structure and caused catastrophic damage. Each of these conversions, and even this act of destruction, speaks to the building's enduring power and symbolic weight. It was never ignored. It was always too important to simply leave alone. Every culture that occupied Athens felt compelled to claim the Acropolis, to leave its own mark on this potent symbol, making its history a physical record of the passage of time and the shifting tides of power, faith, and cultural identity. This long history of appropriation and damage leads us directly to the most heated modern debate surrounding the Acropolis, the fight over the Parthenon marbles. In the early 19th century, Lord Elgin, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, obtained a controversial permit and removed about half of the surviving sculptures from the Parthenon's ruins, later selling them to the British Museum in London, where they remain today. For decades, Greece has passionately campaigned for their permanent return, arguing that they are an inseparable part of a unique monument that belongs to the Athenian sky and the Greek people. The modern Acropolis Museum, a stunning architectural marvel built at the foot of the sacred rock with a direct line of sight to the Parthenon, stands as a powerful argument in this debate. Its top-floor gallery is arranged exactly as the Parthenon once was, housing the sculptures that remained in Greece, with spaces left empty for the missing pieces, a silent but potent accusation against their absence. This is no longer just an artistic or archaeological argument. It is a deeply emotional issue about cultural heritage, colonial legacy, and the right of a nation to reclaim the scattered fragments of its own soul. The ongoing, painstaking restoration work on the Acropolis itself, which uses original materials and ancient techniques to stabilize the structures against modern pollution and past damage, further highlights this commitment to stewardship, presenting Greece as a responsible guardian ready to welcome its most famous children home. Ultimately, the Acropolis forces us to confront the complex and often uncomfortable interplay between power, art, and identity. It was born from the wealth of an empire that called itself a democracy, a monument to divine favor paid for by what many saw as stolen money. Its beautiful sculptures told a story of civic pride that was also a story of military dominance. It has been a pagan temple, a Christian church, an Islamic mosque, and is now a secular museum and a World Heritage Site. It is both a universal symbol of classical ideals and a very specific national symbol for modern Greece. This incredible layering of meanings is what makes it eternally relevant. The Acropolis does not give us easy answers. Instead, it asks difficult, enduring questions about how art is used to project power, how heritage is claimed and contested, and what we truly owe to the masterpieces of the past. It stands not as a static relic of a lost world, but as a living, breathing conversation across 2,500 years, a conversation about who we are, where we come from, and what we choose to value. Now, let's cross a final historical threshold, leaving behind the marble and stone of the Old World to journey into the very heart of North America, to a place that completely shatters the myth of a pre-colonial wilderness empty of high civilization. Just across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, lies the silent, grassy remains of a city that once rivaled London in size. This is Cahokia, the greatest urban center of the Mississippian culture, a bustling metropolis that flourished between 1050 and 1350 of the Common Era. At its peak, it was home to 10 to 20,000 people, a population that would not be surpassed by any city in the United States until the late 1700s. The most immediate and jaw-dropping feature of this place is its architecture, but not in a form we are accustomed to. Cahokia's skyline was not made of stone but of earth. The city is defined by its mounds, over 120 of them, including the colossal Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the entire Americas. This gigantic platform mound rises 100 feet high, covers 14 acres at its base, and contains an estimated 22 million cubic feet of soil. All of it was moved by hand, basketload by basketload, by a society that did not use the wheel, draft animals, or metal tools. The scale of this endeavor is a staggering declaration of power, organization, and communal will that forces us to radically rethink what we know about ancient North America. The question of how Cahokia supported such a large, dense population is a puzzle that archaeologists are still piecing together. The answer lies in a combination of agricultural genius and environmental fortune. The city was perfectly situated in the American bottom, a vast floodplain of the Mississippi River that provided incredibly fertile soil. The Cahokians were master farmers, cultivating a prolific new strain of maize or corn, along with squash, sunflowers, and other crops. This agricultural surplus was the fundamental fuel for their society, allowing them to feed a large non-farming population of rulers, priests, artisans, and laborers. But their sophistication extended far beyond farming. They engineered a complex landscape to manage their world, constructing a series of circular, wooden stockades around the central precincts of the city, walls that were rebuilt multiple times, suggesting a need for defense or a way to control access to the sacred core. Most impressively, they built a central grand plaza that spanned nearly 50 acres, a vast, leveled, open space that was likely used for grand gatherings, markets, and the ceremonial games that were central to their culture. This was not a haphazard collection of villages. It was a meticulously planned urban center with neighborhoods, specialized districts for crafts like pottery and flint knapping, and a clear hierarchical structure reflected in the placement and size of the mounds, which served as platforms for the homes of the elite and temples for the gods. The spiritual and ceremonial life of Cahokia was as complex as its urban planning, and nothing speaks to this more powerfully than a feature now known as Woodhenge. To the west of Monk's Mound, archaeologists discovered a series of large circular patterns formed by massive red cedar posts. This was a sophisticated astronomical observatory, functioning much like its namesake in England. The placement of these posts perfectly aligned with the rising sun at the equinoxes and solstices. The most important alignment was the summer solstice sunrise, which would have been observed from the summit of Monk's Mound, signaling the timing of the crucial harvest and governing a calendar filled with rituals that tied the community to the cosmic order. This deep connection to the heavens suggests a powerful priestly class that derived its authority from the ability to predict the cycles of the sun and moon. Further evidence of a complex belief system comes from a grim but revealing discovery, Mound 72, excavations here uncovered the remains of 270 individuals, many of them young women, who appear to have been sacrificed as part of a mass funeral ceremony for a highly important leader. They were buried alongside caches of spectacular grave goods, including thousands of shell beads and exquisite artworks made of mica and copper, materials sourced from as far away as the Great Lakes and the Gulf Coast. This grisly practice, echoing rituals found in other ancient civilizations, points to a society with a deeply entrenched social hierarchy and a worldview that believed in offering the ultimate tribute to ensure the prosperity of the city and the smooth passage of its rulers into the afterlife. And then, by the mid-1300s, this great city was almost completely abandoned. The once bustling plazas and precincts fell silent, and the mighty mounds were left to the elements. The question of why Cahokia collapsed is just as compelling as the question of how it rose. There was no single invading army, no recorded event. Instead, the decline likely resulted from a perfect storm of environmental and social pressures. Tree ring data indicates that the 12th and 13th centuries saw significant climate fluctuations, including a major drought around 1150 that would have placed immense strain on the agricultural system that fed the masses. This environmental stress could have eroded the authority of the ruling class. If the priests could no longer reliably call upon the gods for rain and a good harvest, their power would have crumbled. Furthermore, such a large, dense population would have been susceptible to disease and resource depletion. Deforestation from building projects and for firewood, overhunting of local game, and the gradual exhaustion of the soil may have made the site unsustainable. It's possible that the society simply unraveled from within, with people gradually choosing to leave the crowded city for smaller, more sustainable communities elsewhere, taking their culture and traditions with them to spread across the southeast and midwest. The legacy of Cahokia is profound. For centuries, the narrative of American history began with the arrival of Europeans, often dismissing the complex societies that existed for millennia prior. Cahokia stands as an irrefutable monument to the brilliance of indigenous engineering, astronomy, and social organization. It forces us to abandon outdated and Eurocentric ideas of what constitutes civilization. You don't need pyramids of stone or systems of writing to create a sophisticated, urban society. The people of Cahokia built a towering civilization literally from the earth beneath their feet, shaping the landscape to fit their vision with an ingenuity and scale that commands our respect. Its story is not one of a mysterious vanishing, but a powerful lesson in adaptation and resilience. The city may have been abandoned, but its people and their descendants persevered, their cultural influence radiating out to shape the Native American nations that Europeans would later encounter. In an era of modern climate concern, Cahokia's history feels strikingly relevant, a reminder of the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental sustainability, and a testament to the enduring and often overlooked achievements of North America's first great metropolis. And so our journey comes to a close, having traversed 11,000 years of human history, from the first temple at Göbekli Tepe to the towering earthworks of Cahokia. What this remarkable tour reveals is that these places are so much more than static relics or forgotten monuments. They are not endpoints, but starting points, active conversations with our collective past that refuse to end. Each stone, each carving, each carefully aligned passageway is a question posed to us across the centuries, challenging our assumptions and inviting us to see the ancient world not as a simple, linear progression, but as a complex tapestry of brilliance, belief, and breathtaking ingenuity. The most profound lesson these ruins teach us is that history is not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be engaged with. Every time we think we have an answer, the ground shifts, a new chamber is discovered with LiDAR, and a dozen new questions emerge, pulling us ever deeper into the story. These threads of innovation and resilience that we've seen woven through every site are not just ancient history, they are a living mirror reflecting our own modern world. The water management genius of the Nabateans at Petra speaks directly to our current struggles with resource conservation. The intricate social organization of the Indus Valley city of Mohenjo-Daro, which thrived without obvious rulers or grand palaces, offers a powerful model of communal living. And the cautionary tale of Cahokia's decline, potentially linked to environmental overreach, echoes with a chilling relevance today. These ruins are not silent. They are whispering urgent lessons about sustainability, societal cohesion, and the delicate balance between human ambition and the natural world. They show us that the challenges we face are not new, but the wisdom to navigate them might very well be buried in the past, waiting for us to listen. This is why the work of historians and archaeologists is so vital. It is an act of preservation, not just of stones and bones, but of human potential. It is a field driven by an insatiable curiosity, the same spark that likely compelled the first person to look at a standing stone and wonder who put it there and why. That spark is what connects us to every single one of the people who built these incredible places. They were not so different from us. They looked at the same stars, sought meaning in the same universe, and dared to create something lasting. By seeking to understand them, we ultimately come to a better understanding of ourselves and the long, unbroken chain of human creativity and endurance of which we are all a part. So as we step away from these crumbled walls and silent plazas, I encourage you to carry this sense of wonder with you. Look at the history around you, whether it's in a local museum, an old building in your town, or even the landscape itself. Ask questions, dig deeper, and embrace the mysteries. The past is the richest story ever told, and it is far from over. If this exploration has ignited a curiosity in you, I would love to hear which of these ruins resonated most deeply in the comments below. Share your thoughts, your own theories, and the mysteries that captivate you. For more journeys into the heart of history's greatest enigmas, be sure to subscribe. Thank you for joining me on this incredible expedition. Keep looking, keep questioning, and never stop seeking the extraordinary truths hidden in the world's most ancient stones.